Coach, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your journey into coaching.
Yeah, so I just finished my 20th year coaching. So I'm an grew up in Alabama, Alabama guy. I guess if you are born there, you have to be one, I guess. But that's kind of where I started my coaching career. My first job, I worked for a guy named Chip Lindsey, who's currently he's the offense coordinator at North Carolina right now. And so straight out of college. I worked for him, and then we were at a small rural school in Northwest Alabama, a 3A school called Carver Heights, which is actually the community my wife and I grew up in. And he kind of moved on to bigger and better things, and I stayed there and was a coordinator. And then I went from there to what was at the time it was the highest classification in Alabama at Pelham High School, which was in they called it the region of death at the time. It was Hoover was there, Mountain Brook, which is coached by Chris Yeager, who's probably I think one of the best high school coaches in America. A lot of good schools, and I went from there to Georgia. So this is I guess this was my 14th year in Georgia, so 20th year coaching overall. When I came to Georgia, I came to Lassiter High School, which is in the North Metro Atlanta area, and was a coordinator there for 9 years. And then I went to Jones County High School for 4 years, which is right outside Macon in a little community called Gray, Georgia. I was offense coordinator there. And we've got three small kids, 8, 6, and 4. We were away from our entire family. We started having some family discussions about how far away we were, and we just kind of had an opportunity open up for us to go back to Lassiter. So I'm back there as quarterback coach. It's a phenomenal school, really high academic standards, and teach AP economics there too as well. My wife teaches chemistry, and so it's a rebuilding situation, but it's a great community, a great place to be. So that's like the short, I guess, 2 minute or so version of it, but that's kind of my journey, I guess.
All right. Well, so is it safe to say you're a Bama fan?
It is. It's a dark days right now for us Bama
Yeah.
fans. Yeah, yeah. Well, you have to pick pretty much Alabama or Auburn when you come out of the womb in Alabama. And my parents were Alabama fans, so that was kind of that. I didn't really have a choice in the matter, and my kids haven't had a choice either. So
So, so how you feeling about Coach Saban hanging it up? I know, we got some fans around here who are big Bama fans as well, and they're kind of in a mourning period right now. So how are you doing?
well, I mean, I think he's the greatest coach of all time. My wife and I were talking last night before we went to bed, and he got hired at Alabama 2 days after we got married. So we were like, we don't know what it's like to be married without Saban being the head football coach at Alabama. So it's an interesting transition in a bunch of ways, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm worried about it. I'm concerned, but it was a good run. I think you're delusional if you don't sit back and kind of go, wow, that was an amazing run. So, and I will say, I do want to say this. So, a little shout out to Coach Saban. One of the most open coaches to high school coaches that I've seen. I've been to SEC schools that I mean they'd give you nothing. It's like they don't even want to talk to you, which is probably not good business, but I've seen it with my own eyes. But Alabama always rolled out the red carpet. So shout out to Coach Saban for how he treated high school coaches for years and years.
Absolutely. I would echo that tremendously. He's been a great asset to our coaching fraternity and someone who's still probably going to give back to the game in whatever role he's going to be at. Just might not be in a head coaching role currently. So, Coach, kind of now like going back into you a little bit, you talked about you being now a quarterback coach at Lassiter High School. Is that correct?
Right. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So, one of the things that drew me to you, I kind of got into your coach tube courses, looking at your vertical seam read concepts, your half roll stuff. All of them, by the way, coach, is great stuff to look into. I would highly recommend it. Even for like an advanced coach, there's always something good in there that coach has to share with you. But so the first thing I want to know a little bit about coaches, when you like were in the process of learning, how to teach your quarterback and how to bring vertical seam reads into your offense. Where did you get that information and start from?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. That's years and years and years of kind of research and talking to guys. So, I was really interested, even as a young coach, in the run and shoot and just the ability to kind of read routes, post snap because we had the original schools I was at where we were outmanned against a lot of the competition we played, and I was always looking for something to give our kids an advantage. And I felt like if we could read stuff on the run, that would give us a chance. So I was always interested in option routes, always have been, and we really started out running shorter option routes, the stuff that in the NFL guys call choice or various things or looky. We called it sloppy. It's kind of all over the game now, but we were messing around with that stuff back in about 2008, 2009. And the more I studied the run and shoot stuff, I did just at that point in time, we didn't really have the coaching fraternity. We didn't have Twitter like we have now. Information was a lot harder to get. And a friend of mine that really kind of broke it down for me in a way that made sense to me was Dan Gonzalez, who's a good friend of mine, who's one of the best passing game minds, I think, in America. I kind of always sing his praises any chance I get. He had a book called, I think it was Concept Based Passing, where that was one of the concepts he went over. And we started working with him a little bit. He was a consultant for our program, asked a lot of questions, and then we kind of took the stuff we got from him and it kind of evolved over the years at our different stops, kind of into what we ended up doing a lot, the last few years. So it's been trial and error. There's been a lot of changes, but I think we've kind of come up with something that we feel good about and feel like I think I would carry it with me anywhere that I was calling plays that I would go. I would still run that stuff. I'm pretty passionate about it.
So day one now going into a new school, let's say, a coach off the street goes and buys your course, wants to put this in. What's the first big piece of advice you're telling them in terms of how you want to bring this on to a high school program?
Yeah, I think you have to find, it's not a play. The whole idea of the seam reads is it's a route within a system, and it can become a series of plays, and it can be as much a part of the system as you want, but there's no point of doing it if you're not gonna run it pretty consistently. It is expensive on the front end. We got to the point where with install and teaching, I think everything is about teaching now. I think that is the advantage you get. Everybody's got the same information everywhere. You can go, any 24-year-old's got access to more stuff than it would have taken a coach 20 years to accumulate. You can have right at your fingertips in an hour. So how well can you teach that stuff? And with how we set up, we have all of our kids ran the seam reads. We went from early on, I felt like, okay, we're going to have one or two guys, or maybe we'll have one position, and that's going to be the only people. Well, we evolved it to where all four of our skill positions and even our running back a little bit, we're doing it. So I think the first thing is you've got to make a decision as a program of how big is this going to be a part of what we're doing. I don't think there's a point in doing it if it's just going to be an occasional wrinkle, but I don't think it's that difficult. If you just sort of spend some time, I think kids love it. It makes them feel like they have a chance to win on every play. It gives them some control and some ownership in your program, and it shows that you trust them, but you have enough constraints in how you're teaching it that you can kind of control, make sure, I think the biggest single misconception when I talk to coaches about any type of option route is they have in their mind that they're just street balling and they're just going to let a kid do what he wants. It's not like that at all. There's very defined rules for what you do and what you do against different coverages or different looks. And we've simplified it where we feel like it's a little more simple than maybe it was in the original run and shoot days. We've stolen some terminology from a lot of great coaches and kind of made it our own. But I think that's what you got to look at it. Well, what are you trying to do passing the football? And from there, build that into, the rest of your scheme. Just for us, that's a day one thing, and we're going to incorporate it into a lot of stuff.
So if, somebody's unfamiliar with, your system and they're trying to implement some of this stuff, when you guys are implementing your seam reads, is that part of, are you guys full field concept people, half field concepts? How's your system structured?
Yeah. So the way that kind of I view it is I think you can pretty much, I guess it's about four things that if you can teach a quarterback to do, you can do pretty much anything that you need in a passing game. So you're going to have full field progressions, where some people call them scans, some people call them sweeps, some people call it across the board, but where I'm literally going to start my eyes on one side of the field and I'm going to work my way across in order, a true progression. So you have to start there. And if a quarterback can process and do that, then you can be good if that's all you do. Then we're also going to have ways to split the field. and to accelerate things and make it easier for the quarterback to basically cheat and cut things out pre or just post snap so we can get through reads faster and get the ball out. So you're going to have straight progression. You're going to have progressions that have alerts. Now, and there can be a couple different types of alerts that you can have. You could have, a man alert. You could have a gift that you're taking. If it's a singled up receiver on the backside, there's no overhang. There's a soft corner where you can take a hitch or a speed out, something like that. So you have a progression with an alert where I'm going to work through a progression, but I have something as a bailout or as an advantage pre or post snap that I can go to right now. It may be a pressure beater, could be various things based on your opponent. And then you've got, and these fit in with your alerts too, but you've got man zone reads and, then you really have 1 high, 2 high reads. But even that, I think you need to have ways to accelerate how fast they could get through the read. Like for us, we don't necessarily tell a kid, you've got to determine pre-snap if it's man or zone. And you can do things where, whether it's lining a running back out wide and shifting him back in or going in motion, but good defenses can sort of show, even at our level in Georgia. I know a lot of high school guys probably aren't seeing this, but there are guys that will play zone and kind of make it look like they're playing man. So just because you have a simple motion across doesn't necessarily give you, a man zone tell. So for us, it's things like, we may run number 2 on a corner and 1 on a drag. I'm just using that as an example. Well, that's going to give me a defined read right now as I'm in my drop of whether or not this is man. If the corner chases that drag, then I've got a man alert. So you build in something, if you've got a zone beater route, for us, the seam read stuff is really to beat zone defenses. And so we've got to build in something that's a man or a pressure answer into the package with that. And then if it's 1 high, 2 high, I think anybody can go up and say, is there 1 safety or is there 2 safeties? But defenses move. So a lot of our stuff is based on finding the weak safety. Typically, it's the boundary safety. It doesn't always have to be, but we're going to find that weak safety, and he doesn't lie very well. I mean, pretty much, if he comes inside the hash, we're going to count it as 1 high. If he is outside the hash post snap, then we're going to count that as 2 high, and it's probably some sort of cloud look. So that's a long answer to tell you kind of the whole system. I think if you're going to be a modern, successful passing offense, you need to be able to do all those things. And so with the way we package the seam reads, it might be within any of those things. So for us, we have micro concepts and macro concepts. And we've done that for years and years and years, going back to about probably 2011. And the idea is, in a macro concept, which is what I just went over, that tells us where to read. Micro concepts, that's actually, when you think about teaching a quarterback a progression, that's a micro concept for us. We want all of our passes to fit within just a few categories, 6 to 7. The most we've ever had is 8. I don't foresee us ever having more than 8. So there's, no matter what pass we have in our system, if we ran 50 passes, which we don't, but if we ran 50 passes, they're going to fit in one of those 7 categories. And so the micro part of it helps you just memorize where to go. So if I say to the kids, this is a horizontal concept pattern, they're going to know that means something about their eyes. That means something about their drop, the timing of receivers coming open. And that's kind of how we set the thing up. And I think doing it that way, even if you're coming, like for me, I came into an offense that was not the offense that I'd been running for years and years. It was someone else's system, but I could really quickly develop a language with quarterbacks about what we were doing and have them understand there's sort of a generic way you can read through all these pass concepts and make it make sense pretty quickly, and it can get you on the same page as far as language goes.
So when you're developing your quarterback's confidence in these reads, and I know you talked about like the pre-snap, post-snap accelerators and alerts to help your quarterback play confident. What's your practice structure like to help build that confidence with your quarterbacks and receivers?
Yeah, that's good question. For us, everything starts with understanding this stuff in quarterback school. That's something I've done everywhere I've been. Quarterbacks, even if you're not meeting with your other kids, I mean, like, we're going to start really early in the winter and having these meetings and going over those concepts and watching film. And I'm a huge believer in having them draw. We draw on the board all the time. And if you can explain it to me, then you understand it. If to get up in front of somebody and have to draw the play, and we do it as a competition sometimes, I'll put both quarterbacks up there and they'll race and they've got to kind of talk through it. You're introducing pressure, you're introducing, accountability, you're introducing that they're having to process through things and think. So we start there. But I think in practice, in season, every drill you do should have a mental component. So whether that's a protection thing or whether they're constantly going through progressions, like if we throw, this is kind of out of vogue right now, but we do throw some rhythm throws in quarterback indie. We don't have just a terrible amount of quarterback indie. We're usually with wide receivers in a group or team setting, but we will do some rhythm throws, which is kind of like not popular right now. Everything is off platform. But I think, we've done some studies through the years of our teams and how many of the throws, if your system's operating correctly, are going to be in rhythm. Well, if we're just, let's say we're throwing to a net, or which I don't like to do, but sometimes you have to in practice, we're going to go through a progression, or we're going to move, or we're going to have some sort of trigger, some sort of mental, something mental going on to help them through that. So I can be constantly working the macro reads, these post snap alerts, even when we're doing rhythm throws to a partner or to a net, because I can give them that safety read, and you can have a net set up, a partner, whatever. I can be that corner that chases, that gives them the man alert reads. So it's about getting mental reps constantly and not just throwing. I think quarterback trainers that implement that, I don't know how it is in Minnesota. The quarterback trainer industry in Metro Georgia is lucrative. And pretty much every quarterback in Metro Atlanta's got their own trainer. The trainers that do work those sort of, stimuli with passing, those tend to be the best guys. I mean, they're not going to necessarily work the scheme that you're going to work, but having them actually do something mental with the quarterbacks, I think is a big deal.
Okay, that's good. So let's take you now in season a little bit. And so
Yeah.
your quarterbacks are getting a little bit more comfortable, developing the reads and whatnot. So as a coordinator and you're developing a game plan, what's the things that's going into, how you're going to structure your concepts, like in terms of like what you're going to put front side, back side, how are you going to present it to your quarterback? And as you're developing those route concepts, are you taking into consideration with your quarterback, like certain alerts that this team does, like with this look, they maybe ruled out a safety weak side. So that's going to, alert our quarterback this versus that. Just kind of walk me through like a game week, how you adjust your scene package just to fit what the opponent's kind of showing on tape.
Yeah, so with the seam reads, I mean, we're going to carry it into every game. Like I believe you've got to have, just like with the run game, you got to have attitude passes. So you have to have some things that I think it was Lincoln Riley a few years ago. I know I've talked about this in a clinic before, but like Lincoln Riley said something that I believed it, and I'd heard coaches sort of say something like this, but he said it, and I was like, all right, he's big time, he's really good. I'm going to use that all the time, and it'll give me instant credibility if I just use this. But he said like 80% of your passes need to be good against just about everything. So we don't want to have to, when it comes to the drop back passing game, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of thought from the quarterback process. So we want it to stay roughly the same. A lot of our game plan stuff is going to be shots in play action, or it's going to be P and 10 plays where we're trying to get a drive started and maybe have something on the perimeter movers. That's where you're going to have less continuity from week to week. Our drop back pass game is going to have a lot of continuity. Where we're going to mess with things is what you're talking about with sort of like alerts. So like for us, seam reads, we're going to have the seam read on the backside, even though it's the core concept in the route. It's technically backside for us because we start our eyes away from the seam read, because we're either manipulating a safety or we're taking advantage of something with the alert system. So that front side is where we're going to mess around from week to week about, what route we feel like is best against what that defense is doing. And by the time I get to the back end of my drop and I'm ready for the first hitch, I should know whether or not that front side pattern is going to come into play. And if it's not, I'm right back to the seam read and I work through the full seam read process. So if we know that their safety is going to be in coverage a lot, say it's a cover one team, then we're going to do something on the front side where, that week our best guy may be who we're trying to get front side away from the seam reads, and we're going to run a slot fade or a corner route or something that's good against cover one. If, their corner's really bad on the front side, if say he always goes to the field, they put their best guy in the boundary, then we're going to do something to attack him with the alert part of the process. And we'll always be able to work back to the seam reads, which is kind of a comfort level for the quarterback. It's, it's a security blanket. So that's the stuff you can mess with. Just like if Y cross has always been a big deal for us, like it is most high school teams in America, we are going to mess around with the front side routes on Y cross in a game plan basis. It's not going to be something brand new, but it's like, what patterns do we have in our system that are good against this coverage? And we've always got Y cross as the bailout. So from week to week, Y cross might not be the primary pattern in Y cross. It may be whatever's on the front side. So that's kind of the way you build it. And if the quarterback always feels like he has answers and he has a bailout, then that's going to make him a lot more comfortable with whatever you do in a game plan. If you can just say, look, this is seam reads, this is Y cross, but this is how we're alerting this, then that makes sense to him much more than if you just say, here's a new play, it's really cool, we're going to run this, and he's thinking, okay, I got to remember this. What's the deal, coach? So keeping that structure the same, and it goes back to talking about the concepts. No matter what we do, it's going to fit in one of those concepts. So if you're a veteran quarterback, I can say a trigger word, that concept, whatever word we have for it, and you instantly know, okay, that's all this is. It makes install a lot easier throughout the season if you have kind of that Lego system of building blocks that you can go to whenever you want.
Yeah, that's great. And you think about like all the different things that defenses are now trying to do for a week-to-week basis to try to confuse the quarterback and confuse the coordinator. I mean, that continuity is super important. And so, one of the things that's becoming kind of in vogue in a lot of defenses, especially at the high school level now, is a lot of what Saban's been teaching. His match coverages. Your cover 5, 6, 7, those kind of things. I'm not sure exactly how common those are in terms of the teams that you're playing, but it is becoming more common, especially up here in the upper Midwest. What would you tell a young coordinator who's for the first time seeing these coverages and he's trying to find ways to create simple things for the quarterback that can help him attack these type of coverages with confidence?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. That is the coverage system in ball. If we go, it's all the influence Coach Saban's had, that tree of coaches and what they've done with match coverages and cover 7, all those different calls and Ripley's match coverages, from one high, like all that stuff. That's what defensive coordinators study. And so you need to study that as an offensive coordinator to kind of figure out, okay, what's the thought process here? And that's something I've been thinking about for years. We played some great teams that do that stuff. I was lucky. Our defense coordinator all the way back in 2010, 2011 was doing that stuff and had a relationship with some of those guys. So you got to kind of look at when you just say a guy runs Saban system coverages or, Kirby Smart coverages, whatever. Well, they run every coverage known to man. What is the high school coach actually running? What is he doing? What's his philosophy? When a lot of guys say, that, well, they're running match coverage, like what it comes down to in saying they run match coverage is they're not playing spot drop or vision coverage where they're immediately dropping to a spot with their eyes on the quarterback. They are reading route releases, and so one of the things you can do is if they're the better they are sometimes, the better they're going to play their rules. And so you can take advantage of that. So like bunch checks, they tend to have 2 or 3 specific bunch or stat checks in that family. And you can pretty quickly see on film, okay, what's their reaction to this? And so you can mess with their releases. People, do that to Alabama. If this year you could watch games and you watch people get in a wide bunch set and attack that. But for me, if they're really good and they have a lot of stuff, I tell the kids, I may not know what they're doing. So you're definitely not going to know what they're doing. What we have to do is break this down into pieces. And you have to have things that give you tails. So rather than trying to figure out, what 2000th version of cover 4 they're playing, in the split field thing, you have something that's going to immediately give you a clue. Like one thing that I found just over the years that's really good, if you run number 3 vertical, if you're in a 3x1 set and you run number 3 vertical, you are going to get information instantly. Okay, does the weak safety poach and come over the top? Well, that tells me instantly kind of what coverage is going on. Is the Mike the guy instead that's carrying number 3 vertical? Okay, I instantly have an understanding of kind of how they're trying to play this. So breaking it down into that stuff, it's not just like, I'm not saying you should just read a defender on every single play. I'm not advocating for that. But in your drop, if you set up your patterns to give you a clue, you can do things where I, as a coach, okay, even if the quarterback doesn't know, I know what coverage they're in now based on how they responded to that. So now I have a call for that. So, if 3 is getting carried by the weak safety who's poaching over, all right, I'm going to have a one-on-one most likely to my individual receiver to the other side. If the corner's really good, can I get the back out in a route? Because I'm going to have a one-on-one most likely with the weak inside linebacker. You think through that stuff. And I challenge anybody, if you're young and you're trying to learn this stuff, all this stuff's online. You can just Google it and you can find all the Saban playbook stuff. They have stuff in those playbooks where they show how they match all these different common patterns in the NCAA. And you probably run, snag is in every one of them. Everybody runs snag. You can see what they're doing. And that's a great way to be better as a coordinator, is to study defense. Listen to those guys at clinics. Go through that stuff, listen to them talk about what gives them problems, and try and cheat and do that stuff to them. I think that's some advice I wish somebody had given me, instead of I banged my head against the wall for a long time with some of this stuff because they're so good at it, some of these teams. But I think there's some secrets you can unlock. At the end of the day, a lot of it ends up being in man. So after all the distribution, so if you have dudes, if you have better players, you can win regardless. But you can struggle to get picks. They do such a good job of passing things off and reading releases. So you have to keep that stuff in mind when you think about what your pattern release structures are going to be like.
Now, one of the other courses that I really enjoyed on Coach 2 was your play action stuff, your half field roll shot that you kind of talked about. One of the things that oftentimes, when you're looking at developing a play action pass structure or package, whatever you want to look at, one of the things that you want to think about is, okay, well, can you protect it long enough? What are the route structures going to be? And so if you were giving advice to a young coach building up their play action passing, what are some of the things that you would say that they should each a successful play action pass concept? What are the kind of components that they should have?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that play action is the thing right now. I think that is kind of the new frontier, as far as you're seeing the most successful offenses that really put defenses in conflict are running a ton of play action. If you watch Texas and you look at what Sark is doing, if you look at what Lane Kiffin is doing at Ole Miss, if you've studied any Washington this year, when you're looking at some of the best offenses in the country, they're running a ton of play action. And you're really, honestly, you're seeing a lot less, Mike Leach style, just drop back 30 times a game. You're seeing just as much passing, but it's from moving the pocket. It's 7-man protections. It's getting the ball down the field. My first advice is always build your play action off your best run schemes. If you go into a game and your 5 best runs, then have play action looks off those. Even if it's in the same pattern for each one, have looks off those best runs. Make your play action look like those run plays. And even, I'm not a big believer that you have to establish the run before going into it. I think you just call play action. It doesn't have to be, hey, we're not running the ball great this game. We need to pop a run before we can run play action. Come out of the gate with play action. It's great. They have to react. Like, if they're any good, linebackers are going to come up against play action. So I think building that in, I like to build it to where we can use multiple protections. So if we have a route, I don't want that to be tied into we can only run it from this protection. Like, if it's a 7-man gap scheme play action protection, if it's an outside zone with a hard sell on outside zone that we're really trying to get safeties to come fit the run, I want to be able to run the same patterns. So, like, for us, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about from that Coach Tube course, it's shown with our kind of gap half roll protection. We can run those same things with zone blocking schemes and pass protection as well. The routes don't really change. So from year to year, if we're more of a zone team or more of a gap team, we can just tell the kids, look, this is a 7-man protection play action pass. There's going to be 7 guys in protection, even if they check out. So it's going to be in that family, and the other 3 guys, your routes don't change. And I think that gives you a lot of multiplicity, again, from week to week without having to change a lot. You've just got Same routes over and over and over, but it's a different look people have to prepare for defensively.
So, what do you think is the next really frontier that offenses are really going to go to? Over the last couple of years, that wide zone system and play action's kind of grown with popularity with the Shanahan's and McVay systems that are kind of becoming popular. For a while the air raid was pretty hot. Where do you think high school, high school football, whether you're in college, what's the next frontier that you think offenses are kind of gearing into?
Well, for like in Georgia, I mean, just over the years I've been here, over the last 13, 14 years, the degree of quarterback play and passing game, how good it is, most people have some degree of balance. And I think you can live in extremes, pass or run one way for sure, and you can have some success. For us, a lot of the upper level state championship level teams have some semblance of balance. I mean, they're going to be able to do both. You'll see guys when there's anomalies, and definitely if you're in the, for us, 1A, 2A, 3A, you're going to have some teams that are, we're talking 75% run, or they maybe pass that much, and they kind of live in extremes. When you get into where we're at, when you're 6A, 7A ball, I think if you really want to be really good, you're going to have some balance. There's everybody's taking the best pieces of everything and kind of putting it into offense, and so there's a lot of cool stuff. I do think a lot of people are kind of still doing the same stuff. You don't have, there's less triple option, which is really hard to defend. There's less wing T, which is really hard to defend. Everybody's kind of looking at the same stuff on Twitter. But I think what is the next frontier in high school is the mixture of movement and tempo. Like for us in Georgia, you have teams that huddle and shift and do a lot of pre-snap stuff, and you have teams that play just extremely fast. I think kind of the next level is teams that can do all those things, that can in a second go one word call and play super fast, that can shift all over the place. I've studied Washington a lot this offseason, and some of the stuff they're doing where operate so fast that they can freeze and then completely change a formation and play. Whereas, in the past, you line up and you freeze, you look over, and then you've got to run a play from that formation. Well, the way they operate is really impressive. They shift all over the place, and just that mixture of tempos, I think, is really hard on a defense. And so I think that is something that any high school defense coordinator would tell you. If you can go really fast and then you line up fast and you don't run a play and then you shift, you're kind of getting the advantages of huddling and playing fast at the same time. And I think that's hard to do. That's why you don't see it a lot, but I do think that's something you're going to see more and more at the high school level.
Coach, yeah, I think we're definitely seeing it a little bit up here. You start seeing a little bit more shifts. Motions are becoming a little more, common in terms of like just the exotic types of motions, whether it be from like the motions that Mike McDaniel's running down in Miami with a Tyreek Hill and whatnot. All these things with the advent of social media are just becoming so popular so quick. It's always good for those coordinators to try to stay ahead of the game as much as you can by being as educated as you can and studying so many different teams. So, Coach, as we wrap up here a little bit, I want to make sure we can connect people to some of the good stuff that you're putting out. What are some of the courses that coaches can find that you've put out on places like CoachTube?
Yeah, on CoachTube, I've got the seam read course like you talked about, and the half roll play action. There's several courses about movers. You mentioned the Shanahan McVay kind of tree. We've kind of ripped some stuff off from them on some naked mover boot keeper type stuff. There's one of those on there. There's a course that's it's just 5 good passes that we like, that are RPOs, quick game, drop back. It's just things that we've had success with that I feel like any offense could use. You didn't necessarily, seam reads. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to have to do a lot of this stuff. But I think that stuff, no matter who you are, what system you run, you could take some of those passes. And then kind of the biggest course on is just content. There's a 2-volume crossing route course. It's pretty much every low crosser we've run for the last 15 years. One of my favorite things to do. So meshes and drives and drags and all that stuff. There's one of those on there, and those have had pretty good feedback. Appreciate you bringing those up for sure.